Our guest today is Mo Latin. He's a multidisciplinary teacher, men's mentor, and artist who's worked with top performers and leading creatives from around the world for over 30 years, successfully helping them extract their unique brilliance, path, and purpose to live aligned and embodied in their greatest personal and professional potential. After decades in the London music industry, then international event production with some of the world's leading teachers in business, personal development, relationship, and sexuality, Mo developed his own truly unique lifestyle business aligned to his gifts, values, and passions. His practice-based embodiment work with men and couples is deeply informed by 20 years practice and exploration in classical martial arts, freeform dance, creative photo erotica, and Shibari, the art of Japanese rope bondage. Yeah. So if you're not muted, make sure you're muted. It's really important that we keep the container focused. So mute yourself. So let's welcome Mo. Bring him up on screen here.
Soma, hey, good morning. From morning. Australia.
Well, yeah, afternoon for us. Yeah.
Good afternoon to you, wherever you are in the world. Good evening. It's really good to be on the call with you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for giving us your time and your wisdom. Really excited for this conversation. So I'd like to get right into it. We don't have a ton of time, and there's a lot that I'd like to cover.
Sure.
So I just want to start off the call with getting a sense of what led you down this path of exploring the kind of dark sexual energy, masculinity, sexual taboo, erotica, and Shibari. Like how did you end up where you are, bringing all these things together?
I guess every man has sexual fantasies, and we all have sexual fantasies. And your question is really, where did I start in this exploration of creating erotica, exploring Shibari, and so on? If I start there, so I can't actually remember when I first saw some Shibari photographs, but what I know is it gripped me instantly. I was instantly taken by the beauty of the art of not only the ropes, and we're going to talk about the knots and the ropes and the patterns a little later, but what really gripped me was the intensity of the experience, the connection between the person tying and the person being tied, the depth of experience, and the trust and vulnerability that was required in that space to actually explore that fully. How I actually got into this particular space was, let me see, around 2013, 12, 13, I was in London, and I was actually helping my dad move house. So I was in London for a little while. It took a while to sell his house. And I had been curious about Shibari, and some classes began to pop up online in a certain community in FetLife. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with FetLife, but it's like a Facebook community for those interested in kink. So I began to see events pop up on FetLife, and I saw a couple of classes come up, so I attended a couple of classes. But at the same time, my brother, who'd been into photography for many, many years, offered me a camera. Now, I was never really into photography. I wasn't that interested in taking pictures. My art was music. I'd been in the music industry for many years. But I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. So I went to a couple of classes, and I was really fortunate to find a rope partner who was willing to practice with me. And I practiced a few ties. They came out well. I took a few pictures and I posted them online, and I got a great response. Can't even remember where I posted them, but I got some feedback that kind of inspired me to do more. And what I did from there was I joined a photography community, and I searched out models and photographers that inspired me. And what I mean by inspired me is people who are creating something a little more unique, people who had experience, people who were, what attracted me was the voyeuristic experience, the kind of observation of a sexual scene. So I was dialing into those kind of artists, and I contacted a couple and I said, hey, I'm new to this, but I've done some ties. I would really love to connect with a couple of people who have experience in this. And I was really fortunate that a very experienced model and the photographer she had worked with said yes. So I got to do a great session with them. And it was a big step for me to work with someone so experienced. But I learned a huge amount in that session. And I learned how to, it wasn't so much about the photography itself, but it was actually about being able to feel what was in me that I wanted to create and find a way to express that to the model that I was working with cleanly. And that's really part of the biggest learning in this whole journey.
A follow-up question around that is like, what did that, being in that exploration, what did that develop in you in terms of, exploring maybe this new angle of your, some fantasy and eroticism? I guess what did it bring to you in your life and potentially your intimate relationships?
So this was a really interesting and challenging time for me and Lisa. I've been with Lisa since 2008, and we were 5 years in, and I was in London, and I said to her, hey, I'm doing these classes. I would love to learn Shibari. I would love to explore this with you. I would also love to create erotica. I would love to start to take photographs of the shoots, of the ties that I'm doing, and create opportunities to work with models and perhaps other photographers. And of course, delving into this whole realm is potentially fraught with, fraught with all kinds of risks and dangers. And what I mean by that is, of course, if I'm in a monogamous relationship with a partner and I want to somehow engage with other women, especially in this kind of context where I am creating sexually charged art, then how do I navigate that? And we set up an arrangement where we would have calls specifically around feeling into what was going on in me when I would be talking about the photo shoot. And what I mean by that is that I would talk about a specific model, a specific arrangement, a specific location, a specific set of ideas. And I would be describing this to Lisa from the other side of the planet. And during these conversations, she was in Australia, I was in London. During these conversations, she would feel into the nuances of my expression. So she would feel into the tone of my voice, the expression of my face, the pauses, essentially what was going on inside me internally as I spoke about what it was I wanted to create and who it was that I wanted to create this with. And the reason this was really valuable for both of us is because it allowed us to shine a spotlight on anything that felt out of integrity, I guess is the easiest way to say it. If I had a sexual charge or sexual interest about the model that I was working with, which for the most time was actually not there, because although I was working with beautiful women, I mean, women in their 20s, 30s with absolutely perfect bodies, and I would be working in very sexual situations, although my body would be interested perhaps in their body, because on a physical level it's bound to happen, there's going to be an attraction. Energetically, I wasn't genuinely that interested. It didn't actually interest me beyond the physical attraction. But still, there was this very delicate and tender conversation that I would have with Lisa, where I would describe the model, I'd send her a picture, I'd talk about her, I'd talk about my conversation with her, my communication. And at each point, if something came up in how I was speaking or how I was expressing that felt off in some way, Lisa would reflect that to me. And I'd go, yeah, okay, I get that. And I'd feel into what was there, and whatever it may be would come to the surface, and we'd talk about it a little more until it was clear and done. And then we'd talk about the next piece and the next piece until she was comfortable that I was able to go ahead in this arrangement with integrity. So it was very much a path I walked together with my partner. I also made it very clear that I would love to explore this and create this art with as much freedom as possible. And that I was doing this, how can I say this? Purely as an art form. So I want to make a distinction here between how can I say this? The art of creating erotica and the art of Shibari. And this kind of delves into that piece around it's not about the knots. So if I'm creating a piece of art, then it's almost like I'm doing it as a studio exercise. It's not that I'm engaging sexually with this woman as I tie her, but I'm creating inside of me the image, the essence, the energy of what it is I want to create in the art, and then finding a way to cleanly speak to her and describe what I want, which is a very, very different experience for me and for her than actually tying someone in what you might describe as a kind of intimate tango when you're tying with ropes. There's a dance of intimacy that happens between the person who's tying and the person who's receiving the tie. So it's a very, very different experience. But coming back to this piece around actually creating the art and how that impacted my relationship, it taught us both. It taught me very much about how to navigate this path of my hunger, my desire, my urge to explore this art, to create artistic pieces, and to be able to be with one or two young, beautiful women, access inside me what I wanted to portray in the available context, the house we were shooting in, the studio, whatever it was. But do that in a way that was both authentic to what I was feeling, but also very respectful to my relationship and to the women I was working with. So it was a really, really valuable experience all the way through. I mean, I haven't done so much of it in the last year or so, but there was a period of time where I was doing maybe a couple of shoots a month, and it was a strong experience. It was a really strong experience to be in that, to be in the flow of creating that, to be dialing further and further into what it was that I wanted to express as art, which came from what I felt inside in terms of expressions of fantasy in some way. What would I do with this woman? What could I do with this woman or with these two women that are here in front of me there? They're in agreement with creating a piece of art. They've agreed to give up their time and their energy and to put themselves into this collaboration. It's for me to make them feel safe in that, which is a key piece in this. And it's also for me to do my best to authentically feel into and then express and direct them into what it is that I want to create. And if any of that is tainted with what I call the teenage porn pervert, which we all have in us at some level, the guy who's watched porn and had his kind of teenage boy hunger or curiosity or basically immature sexual engagement with sexuality in the space. If that comes into the space, then it's all over in the photo shoot situation, which of course parallels our sexual experience with our partners. Because if we bring that shallow, immature sexuality to our engagement with our own intimate partner, and that, it doesn't matter whether you're straight, gay, bi, it's really irrelevant. If we bring that immaturity to our sexual experiences, then it's going to very much limit where we can go with that. So I hope that gives some explanation and some kind of insight into that journey. And please ask any more questions about that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the sense that I got was you made room in your relationship, in your life, to allow for these parts of you, whatever parts they are, to explore fantasies. Yet somehow you were able to explore those consciously in a contained way, so that, you know, this kind of teenage pervert, immature sexual energy somehow didn't leak in. And I guess that's where my curiosity goes. And I think it would probably be true for a lot of men, is like, wow, how do you hold these these beautiful women in these poses, half naked, and not start leaking that immature energy into the space?
So this comes down to what I've learned as a core practice in my life, which I was exposed to by my work with David Data over the years. So I started working with David and studying with David 2008 with Lisa. We did our first workshop together, and Soma, you'd probably be familiar with this, and some of the men on here may be familiar with what's called the microcosmic orbit and circulating your breath. So that's one of the fundamentals in this, is learning how to notice what happens in the body and be able to circulate your breath, manage your energy, and essentially regulate and modulate your response to both your internal and external experience. And what I mean by that is, there would be a time when even thinking about the possibility of doing a photo shoot with beautiful women would be an overload. And perhaps for some men on the call, that kind of experience maybe brings a surge of energy to the body, a surge of excitement. So on a slight tangent, but also very core to this whole conversation, I would invite all men here just to pay attention to what it is that's happening in your body as we're speaking around all of these topics, and perhaps feel into if you had the opportunity to create a photo shoot with one or two beautiful women, or if you had the opportunity to explore a fantasy, what is it that happens in your body as you are allowing that to enter your imagination, allowing that to enter your physical feeling? I'm not just talking about sexual arousal of a physical kind. I'm talking about your nervous system response, changes in your energy, a shrinking of your consciousness, or an expanding of your consciousness. So all of these pieces are relevant to the question you asked, Soma, which is about how do I manage myself in that context? How do I stay conscious and clean and non-leaky when I'm working with a couple of beautiful women? So in all of this, I'm paying attention to my breath. I'm paying attention to my physiology. I'm paying attention to my internal dialogue. I'm paying attention to how I'm expressing myself, and I'm paying attention to the response I'm getting from the women that I'm working with. So if I start with the breath, I'm focusing on having long, slow breath. Constantly having long, slow breath, which smooths out the nervous system. And bringing that breath down the front of the body and up the spine. So I'm circulating the breath in something called the microcosmic orbit, which David Data talks about, Mantak Chia, many of the other sexual teachers on the planet. That also requires resting the tongue gently on the roof of the mouth, which creates a circuit. And what my experience is around that is that it dissipates the energy that I hold and most men tend to hold, which is the sexual energy, which is either in imagination, in fantasy, we'll get all in the head around something, or in the genitals. So by circulating this energy, it does also charge your sexual energy if you bring that breath strongly down into your cock, into your balls, into the base of the body. But also by pressing that energy up the spine and out the top of the head, you can diminish that sexual intensity. And this is something you can play with in this context and in your sexual explorations. So I'd be in this experience, and I'm just talking about one piece of it, the breath, where if I feel something coming up in me, some kind of sexual charge or some kind of sexual energy, to keep it clean in the space, I would be pressing that energy out my spine and out the top of my head constantly, so that I'm allowing it to flow through the body, not allowing it to get stuck, but making sure that I have a release, a pressure valve that I'm letting go of. So I'm actually reducing that sexual charge in me, while at the same time being able to access it, so that I'm able to be in contact with it, be in touch with it, find ways to speak it, but without getting kind of sucked into it, hooked into it. I'd also be paying attention to my physiology. So if I'm beginning to, and we all have this, it might be interesting for each of you to pay attention to what happens in your body as we're going through this conversation, as you may be feeling your own internal response to any of these potential scenarios. And it could be anything that happens in your body. It could be that your shoulders collapse a little, your neck kind of contracts a little, you get a little tension in the face, you get an anxiety in the belly, you get a shrinking of the spine, which may be related to your sexual confidence and so on. There's all kinds of things that may happen. But really what I'm saying here is, by paying attention to the breath and noticing when the breath gets short and consciously practicing to open that breath, and by paying attention to the body and noticing when the body collapses or shrinks or contracts in some way. And it could be minor, I'm kind of exaggerating it here. It could be literally the difference between this and this. A tiny little shift that may relate to a big internal emotional shift. It's for us to pay attention to that and to consciously open the body and to continue to circulate the breath. And the reason we're doing this is because we're countering the nervous system response, which informs the body to go into a physiological response. They're interweaved, inseparable. And your emotional response, all of these things are connected. And by countering that, by opening the body and circulating the breath, we are retraining the nervous system to be more comfortable in that situation. We're almost forcing the body open, forcing the breath open, so that we can retrain ourselves to be open in that situation. And as the sexual charge may come in that situation with these women, I would just have to regulate. I would have to do my best to feel into what I want to create. Literally, sometimes just looking at the women that I have in front of me, or the woman I have in front of me, looking at the wardrobe she's brought with her, the outfits, the lingerie, the heels, looking at the location that I have to work with, maybe in someone's house, it may be a kitchen or a front room or a lounge room, looking at the light I have, and basically pulling all this into, okay, I have these ingredients, which includes this beautiful woman. What can I do with this? How can I create art with this? And I do my best to feel into that and go, okay. I mean, we've all had that when we've seen a woman in the street or in the supermarket or in the cafe, and you get a sudden flash of an angle. She's moving in a certain angle, or she smiles in a certain way, or she bends over in a certain way, leaning over something, or you get a flash of cleavage, and instantly we get a fantasy. I mean, who's had that? Yeah, just so. Yeah, there you go. So pretty much everyone raises their hand, okay? So this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ability to, not even the ability, the ownership of that fantasy, the ownership of that instant flash that we get of, wow, she's fucking beautiful, or she just emits a certain sexual flavor, and boom, like, yeah, I would do this, I would do that. We feel that instantly, but what I'm looking for here is the ability to feel that more deeply, own it, hold it, and look her straight in the eye and say, this is what I want, this is what we're going to do. You're going to put on this skirt, you're going to put on these stockings, you're going to put on these heels, I'm going to take you over to this table, you're going to be bent over this table in this certain way, I'm going to tie your legs in this way, I'm going to hitch your skirt up in this way, or I might get the other woman to come and do this, and whatever it is. I mean, you can imagine all kinds of scenarios. And I feel very comfortable about talking with this because I've done it many, many times. But I can imagine that for some men who are listening here, it's like, how would I ride out that situation? And this is really what we're talking about. These reference points of circulating the breath and paying attention to the body are key to all of this. And this is in an artistic scenario where I'm not going to be having sex with these women. It's very clear. That's a boundary. It's very clear. It's not a sexual arrangement. Yet, clearly, I need to be able to access my sexuality to create this art. And I need to be able to hold space for her to feel safe, to let go into that, so that she's able to give her gift. She's able to express herself sexually in a way that she feels held, respected, safe, trusting of me. She is able to be more vulnerable, be more expressive in her body. And that takes a lot, because we have to remember as men that women get slimed every day, all day long, by us, because of what I spoke about earlier, which is she bends over, she smiles, we get a flash of cleavage, we get whatever, and instantly we have that natural response. So part of our development as men is to learn how to hold that container in ourselves as well when we're out in everyday life, so that we're not sliming all the women that we meet as we go through the day. And we're able to acknowledge that momentary sensation in ourselves and to hold it, but without projecting that onto her and without leaving her with the residue of our unconscious slime, so that she's basically feeling that, carrying that, traumatized by that. Women are literally being forced to be exposed to this, or sponge this up through their day as they go through the world. And that's our responsibility as men, to do our best to hold that consciously so that we're not doing that. And I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here, but to me it's all relevant. It's all about being aware of our primal responses in a way, being aware of our sexual desires, being aware of how conscious we are around those, how consciously we're able to hold our sexual energy in a way that serves us and serves the world, and the world being our sexual partner, so that we can actually explore that with our intimate partner safely and in a trustable environment, trustable context, but also when we go out into the real world and we're not leaking our sexual energy everywhere, which is what we're probably most practiced from our teenage years, because no one's ever taught us how to do this. It's a key piece. So we're off on a couple of tangents there, but anyway.
Oh, it's all good stuff, really important, and I wanted to touch on these things anyway. And I'm just gonna try to summarize what you shared and kind of ground it in a way that I think might be sensible. And what I'm hearing is you're making room in yourself for desire that might exist in your mind through fantasy. You're making room in yourself for these natural kind of primal biological impulses, but you've actually created really clear boundaries, and you're honoring those boundaries, and you're working with that energy. You're not suppressing it. You're not telling yourself it's bad or wrong. And I think there's an important distinction, because it's really easy to go that direction with this kind of work as well, right? Yeah.
For
So
sure.
I think this is very practical, and I, maybe you could just speak a little bit more to, guys that are maybe tuning into this that aren't used to language like leaky energy and being clean, and just speaking to the impact a little bit more that you've noticed in your practice and experience. And I know we got a lot to cover, but maybe quickly you can unpack that a little bit.
Sure. So in all these circumstances, whether it be within the photo shoot context, the artistic context, or whether it be in our intimate relationship or our experience of walking around in everyday life, having conscious awareness of containing ourselves. And what I mean by that, the opposite of that is what we're speaking about here, having leaky energy. Having a capacity to contain our sexual energy is really important. And when we're talking about a leak, for example, how can I say this? One way could be that if we meet with someone on the checkout, for example, a woman on the checkout, and instead of just saying hello, good morning, thank you, how's your day, some regular conversation, there's an undertone of some kind where we're wanting to get something in a way. We're wanting to get some kind of sexual response, some kind of, it could be validation, for example, but some kind of sexual response for her that's actually really inappropriate in the moment. It's just not appropriate to be doing that.
Yeah. Can I just pause you right there and just to bring the room in with us, who can own doing that at some point in your life?
Yeah, that's great. So if I speak again to just walking down the street and we see a beautiful woman and our attention immediately goes to her, but not just as a subtle noticing of like, wow, she's beautiful, and then straight back online. It's like, fuck man, wow. And then all of a sudden your entire world is, look at that ass, oh my God, the way she moves, fucking wow, right? There's a big difference in doing that than just like, wow, she is exquisite, thank you, and back on track. You feel the difference in that, yeah? So this is what we're talking about. There's a big shift, there's a big difference between those two ways of appreciating a woman's sexuality. In the context of the photo shoots, for example, if I hold a space that is safe enough for me to say to her, to describe what it is that I want to create in a way that she feels safe, she's going to be able to relax into that. But if there's a leakiness inside that communication, inside that transmission, she's not going to feel comfortable to relax. So if I can look her in the eye and say, okay, we're going to do a schoolgirl scene, a schoolgirl shoot. It's going to be a short skirt. We're going to be over by the window. There's going to be like a hint of your underwear that I'm going to see. You're going to kind of give me this slightly teasing look over your shoulder. Your arms are going to be tied behind. Your breasts are going to be exposed. I mean, even as I describe this, who's noticing like just little surges of energy in your body, like, fuck yeah, okay? So you have this, it happens. You just own it, just notice it. This is a key piece, own it, notice it. And as you do that, notice what happens in your body. Notice whether you're getting a shortening of breath, whether you're contracting, whether you're feeling shame around this. All of these pieces are key to actually navigating this space. Because as those responses come up, it's for you to pay attention to your body and to counter that response. That's not making it wrong, but it's countering that response from a place of awareness. So that if you do notice your breath shortening, if you do notice your awareness contracting, if you do notice your body shrinking in some way or squirming or being uncomfortable, and it could be just an internal response. It's not necessarily an external response. Your body could be really solid, but internally you're churning and getting anxious or getting overexcited or whatever it may be. All of those could be described as not necessarily leakiness, it depends how it presents, but something to pay attention to and to practice through as it arises. So even as we're talking about this, just notice what happens in your body and begin to pay attention to your breath, to the tension in your body, and so on. And we can dive a little more into that a little later. So I described this scene of potentially setting up a photo shoot in a certain way. And the way I described it was really cleanly. If I had felt that in me and described it to her in a different way from my teenage porn pervert, and I've seen this with other photographers, it may be that I go, hey, put the skirt on, I'm going to bend you over, I want to get your tits out. And then I'm kind of doing it as the non-jokey guy, the kind of little stressed and anxious about it because he's not able to own his sexuality. Or there's the other guy who's, how can I say it? All kind of cheeky and flirty in it. Yeah, nice tits, darling. Let's pop them out, and let's have you bend over and give me that cheeky wink, and feeling sexy, huh? I mean, all of these. I've seen this from other photographers when I've worked with them, and to me, it's just inappropriate. It's not holding a safe space. It's not deepening the experience. It's not creating a container for her to feel, fuck yeah, this guy, he can handle himself. He can handle his sexuality. I feel safe. I feel held, I feel seen, I feel respected, and I also feel that he is authentic in feeling what's there and being able to express it. Did you get a sense of it? I was given a couple of flavors there of my experience of different photographers and how the masculine or how men may yeah, express their sexual desires in an unhealthy way? Could you get a sense of, I'm doing my best to do bad photographer impressions, yeah? But you get a sense of what I'm trying to portray here. I've literally been with guys who've done fucking way more shoots than me. I've done 50, 60 shoots, and I don't consider myself a photographer. Maybe 70 shoots, I don't know. But I don't consider myself a photographer. I happen to create good art because, or I get good feedback on it because I have an artistic eye and I'm able to express what I want. And I've basically learned how to operate the camera at a basic level. But I don't consider myself a photographer. But I've worked with guys who've done thousands of shoots over decades with thousands of beautiful women. And what I just described was what I experienced, how they were trying to lead these women to feel safe. And I've been on shoots where the models have said to me, okay, that guy's done enough shots, get him out of here because I actually want to create some good art. I want to give you more of myself. I mean, that's not really the words that I've heard, but it's basically, I want to be able to relax and go next level. And that doesn't mean being explicit. That just means being able to relax and feel safe. And they've literally said to me, hey, can we just get that guy to leave the room? I can't work with him. So these are little tastes of my experience along this path around ways of expressing yourself sexually and ways that men can be really leaky in ways that make women feel unsafe. Yeah.
Yeah. And I imagine this applies to if you're in a relationship that you're already intimate and sexual, that your woman is just as sensitive to these subtle undercurrents, probably in particular when your energy is leaking somewhere else, onto another woman. I'm sure a lot of you that have experienced long-term relationships may have been called out on that at some point or another. And yeah, so I think we can forget as men that level of sensitivity, even though probably most of us have experienced it in one way or another. But we just kind of, I think for men, we can go into just masculine mode of relating to the world and forget that there's these other creatures out there that are wired a little bit differently. It doesn't mean we don't have sensitivities ourselves, but biology, nature, conditioning to whatever degree has made things the way that they are. And so learning to work with them, right? Learning to honor these parts of ourselves as men, and also stepping into a more mature place of how we're relating sexually with the world. I also agree is so powerful, and it's been challenging for me personally in my own journey, and it's these kinds of practices that make all the difference. So yeah, I want to jump into a little bit more around Shibari itself, as a practice. And I know it's not about the knots. So what is it about?
For me, Shibari is about the experience of being so deeply connected to your partner that you're literally feeling your way through each moment and navigating each moment based on the response that the moment brings. And this speaks to the sensitivity that you just mentioned there, which is the need for us as men to practice paying attention to our own internal experience and paying attention to her. I'm just going to use her. I'm going to talk about this in a heterosexual context, but it applies to every relationship. So, yeah, I said Shibari is not about the knots. What we tend to do as men is to focus on the technical. Yeah, let me learn how to tie that tie. That tie looks cool. I really want to tie her in this way. I have to get it right. I have to get it perfect. I have to get the knots looking exactly right. The wraps looking right. The tensions looking right. All has to be balanced, etc., etc. And if you've seen any of my art, there's a lot of that in there because it's done as an artistic piece. I'm aiming for a certain look. But if I'm tying for the experience of tying, it's a very, very different approach. I can tie in that way, or one can tie in a way where it actually looks perfect if you have enough practice and you take enough time. But for me, Shibari is about feeling her response to whatever it is that I do, and for us to navigate the experience together. So I could take one rope and take 15 minutes to tease that rope onto her wrists and off, and then back on again. And then another 5 minutes to tease that off and very slowly bring her hand behind her back. I'm really accelerating here. I mean, it could be that I really tease her hand behind the back, and at the same time, I don't know, running my fingers down her face and pushing my chest into her body from behind and pressing my heel into her calf as we're kneeling, and still this hand's coming back, and I stop for a moment and I breathe with her. And then maybe I bring it round quickly and she's like, ah. And then I relax for a second. And then I push her a little with my body, and I press and I squeeze and I pull her in and I push her away, and then the other hand comes back. Okay, and I'm kind of playing with this. I have no idea what the fuck I was going to do with this call, but I'm playing with this because that's really what it's about. It's the art. Okay, it's the art of the dance. That's what this is about. So maybe I do that and she ends up like this, and I take another minute to tease the rope between her wrists, and then over the next minute I slowly bring the rope across her chest above her breasts, and then the next wrap goes on over the next 2 minutes. I tighten and I loosen. So I'm doing my best to describe, in my male body to a bunch of guys on a screen, what that might look like and feel like, which of course is very different to having, sitting back and having the camera low and me actually doing this with a woman. But that's, to me, is the essence of what this is about. It's the dance of two bodies and two energies, and the control and surrender, the lead and the follow, if you like, of that dance. And that has to come from her having deep trust in me, for me to be able to hold that space, for me to be able to take her on a journey, for her to relax into that and be led, for her to surrender into that, because she knows I've got her. And that I'm not focused on getting technically perfect, but because I am with her and not obsessed with the rope. The moment I start to be obsessed with the rope and I start to put my attention onto the knots, then she disappears from my experience. I'm no longer with her, and she feels that. And of course she wants to look pretty in the ropes, and she wants it to look fantastic. But ultimately, in that intimate dance, it's not about how the ropes look. It's about the dynamic play. It's about bringing tender touch and fucking like fire and dynamism and movement, and then back to stillness. And this really speaks to some of the other things, Soma, that we touched upon, which is my explorations in both martial arts and freeform dance, which is all about embodiment practice. It's about finding ways to train your body to be able to move with fluidity. so that you have the capacity for very gentle control, very gentle movement in your body, and sudden dynamic, intense changes. So that you're able to do that in your own body in a grounded way, balanced, in control, conscious of your breath, conscious of the impact that you're having on your partner. And also being able to use martial type techniques, if you like, martial arts type techniques, which is weight transference, it's knowing how to manipulate locks and joints, knowing how to use leverage, knowing how to lean into someone so you take their balance, all of these pieces. Who's done some form of martial arts here? Like, you understand what I'm talking about there, yeah? This is very different to karate and kung fu, which are, for example, which are much more striking arts. But we're talking about something where there's, judo is a good example, or jiu-jitsu. Neither of which I'm deeply familiar with, but I'm trying to give you an overview of the different martial arts forms, from a striking art, where there's distance, to a more intimate contact martial art, where you're actually learning how to manipulate the body. That's the art that I've studied, Bujinkan, has all of this. Yeah. So when I say it's not about the knots, that's what I mean. The knots can be, the end result of paying attention to that can look beautiful, but it can leave her feeling like kind of a meat sack, like just a demonstration body that you've used to practice your technical shit on, and she looks great. She looks all pretty and looks fantastic with her arms tied behind her back and whatever it is. But has she had an intimate experience? Probably not. Has she felt your depth, your heart, your leadership, your guidance, your sensuality, your sexuality? Probably not, because you've been focused on the rope. So it's a very different experience.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And I can see how that same kind of goal orientation can show up with actual sexual experiences, obviously. And so it sounds to me it's not about the an end goal, but it's about the connection that's possible, and paying attention, and the power of our attention as men, and the impact of where our attention goes on sensitive nervous systems.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So, we just have a few more minutes for the live broadcast. I might have time for one more question. And yeah, I would say, just for men that are kind of just getting turned on to these concepts, what's a good entry point? Somebody that maybe has been in a relationship a long time, they want to create more depth and intimacy, maybe things feel a little stagnant or stuck or boring. And yeah, where could a man start on this journey?
Okay.
See some results. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it always comes back to consciousness around body and breath. That's fundamental for me. And the various aspects that I've touched upon today, to me, it's about finding ways to practice that in your everyday environment, so that you become more and more conscious of what's happening in your body and breath, so that when it counts in intimacy, so if, for example, when you're in intimate practice, engagement, exploration, whatever you want to call it, you've already been practicing outside of that. So what this looks like in everyday life is paying attention to your breath and body as you move around the world. So practicing circulating your breath. We could do a little practice on this a little later, but it's easily found online if you look at the microcosmic orbit and look at the simplest version. It gets very complex. But essentially learning how to circulate your breath so that you are learning how to Notice and pay attention and modulate your own energy, your sexual energy as the waves come through your body. Learning to pay attention to your bodily responses so that you're doing the same. You're learning to counter those as your nervous system takes over the moment, which is really what happens. We can be in either in an internal sexual experience or a real world sexual experience, and we feel a change in our energy which essentially limits or shrinks our consciousness. And it's for us to notice that and expand that, to come back to the breath and the body, so that both of those are more consciously engaged in the moment. And the reason I'm speaking about all this as a practice in everyday life is so that you're doing the dojo work. That's why we train in the dojo. We train in the dojo in martial arts so that we've done 1,000 repetitions of something, so that if something happens in the street, our body has been trained to respond to that. We don't have to think about how to move. In fact, it would be pointless to try and think about how to move in a attack situation. Your body has to be trained already. So the same applies. You train yourself outside of these potentially sexually charged contexts so that when they occur, you've already done the training in your body to learn how to navigate that more consciously. And your breath automatically lengthens and deepens. You automatically go into circulating the energy. You automatically go into opening your body when you feel it shrink.
Beautiful.
I mean, there's more and more to this, but I hope that
I know there's a lot.
Is that helpful?
Definitely helpful. I know it is. And I just want to just close with a little larger context around, creating your life as a practice and how you can practice through life, at the checkout line, coffee shop, wherever, the yoga studio. That's a challenging one, right? There's a lot of women in yoga classes.
Sure.
And so, just being, maybe anybody that's listening on the live stream, like, how can you take this home with you with the intention of not only like being a safer man in the world, being more of a man of integrity, which I imagine there's a deep part of you that wants that, and how you can just in these little moments create more awareness in your body, in your breath, to have a impact in the world that's positive and not kind of taking and leaking.
Yeah, the core fundamental principle, if there was one thing aside from the breath, but if there's one thing I wanted to leave you with as a nugget, everything you do is practice. Everything you do is practice, and you are always practicing something. So right now, you are practicing holding your body in a certain way. You're practicing breathing in a certain way. You're practicing either having a collapsed spine or holding yourself relaxedly erect. You are breathing shallow just into the top quarter of your body, or you're doing full body breaths, or somewhere in between. You're either completely with me, or you're thinking about what's next, or who knows what's going on inside of here. So all of these things, you could be fidgeting, you could be still. These are probably habits that, unless you pay attention to them, you will continue practicing those habits that potentially get in the way of all that we've been talking about in this call and more. These habits limit your freedom. These habits limit your engagement with the world. These habits limit your sexual expression. Because if you are, after this call, if you're continuing to practice shallow breath, if you're continuing to practice noticing that your body shrinks when you have certain thoughts and you're not countering that to open it, and again, I'm exaggerating it. If you continue to practice leaking with women with other potential sexual partners as you go around your world. That's what you're choosing to practice. Instead of containing the energy, opening your body, filling your body with breath, circulating the breath, pressing the excess sexual energy out the top of your head. All of these things are potential ways to practice, which will serve you. The first examples, which are your limiting nervous system habits, once you become aware of them, you're then at a choice point of choosing to continue to practice those habits or practicing something new that serves a new way of life, and you're becoming a newly programmed man. And that's essentially what we're talking about, retraining your nervous system with every opportunity. So everything you do is practice. Right now, you are practicing something. Just notice and choose.
Yeah, powerful. Yeah, and you know, practice builds muscles, right? And I just want to close with that. Like the more you habituate around a certain practice, the more developed that's going to be in you. So if you've practiced leaking your energy for 20 years, it's going to take a while to reorient back to a new way of working with that energy. So just consider that if you take this on, that it may be challenging for a little while. So we're going to close the live stream there. I want you guys that are watching this. So just to clarify, for guys that are in the Zoom room, we are going to stay on for another 20 minutes or so, and we're going to open it up for Q&A within the people that are here. But we're going to close the live stream just to seal up this container and create a safer space. Those that are tuned in on Facebook, you can check out Mo's work on Instagram. His Instagram handle is Art of Sexpression XX, or you could look him up under mo.latin. His website is molatin.com, which is more focused on his coaching and men's work. And then he's got artofsexpression.com to look at some of his beautiful erotic art. So check it out if you have time. And is there anything else you want to add in there? Anything that you've got going on that you want to share, Mo, before we close the live stream?
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of pieces. This conversation and others I'm having at the moment are informing what's next for me. And I'm very keen to start creating more work that focuses on this realm of Shibari and erotica and what I've learned from that and how I can share that with the world. So for next year, I really want to create something around that, and I'm working on that at the moment. My current offering is called the Martial Art of Relationship. That's the core men's program I offer at the moment, which is teaching men relationship principles through martial arts engagement. It's a very powerful program. And if you go to, you can learn a little more about this at martialartofrelationship.com, which you see under my name on screen. And what may be helpful for you guys is there's a short PDF download that I've created that talks about practice, talks about creating fundamental practices in your life and the importance of doing this. So if that interests you, then visit that URL and you'll find something there. But yeah, thank you for sharing those links, Soma, and I'm sure we'll follow up with something if you didn't catch them.
Yeah, those I'll post them under any of the video streams that are there. So if you're watching this, just keep an eye out for that. And gentlemen that are here or have signed up, you'll be able to get all of his links via email. So thanks for tuning in on Facebook, and we're going to close it down.
Thank you.
All right. So this portion of the call is about this group. I mean, there's definitely a little more we can cover, but I think we'll cover a lot by you guys bringing your personal questions or anything that you're working with in your life that maybe you imagine this might apply in some way. So anybody have something that it's like Ken's got his virtual hand up. So we'll start with you, and then anybody else that feels like you have a question, just, I'm not exactly sure how to do it, but hopefully you can figure out how to do the little emoji hand. Yeah. All right, Ken, looks like you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Awesome.
Ken, hey.
Hey, Mo. I just want to say thank you so much for being here and sharing with us your experience. So I've had Shibari coming up a lot in my field lately, a lot of friends that are involved in it. I love the art. I've never done it myself, experienced it firsthand, but I'm a sexual empowerment coach. And for me, like when you describe like directing the photography and like maybe like acting out whatever wants to be like expressed through you as maybe even sexual fantasy, is that kind of a correct assumption? Yeah. So my question is, do you notice that through that expression of your art and creating that art, that there's any type of release that happens within you that you might call healing?
Say that last phrase, it just dropped for a moment. Any kind of release that happens?
Is there some kind of release within you that you could, classify as healing within you?
What I notice, and what I've noticed over the years, is that it has helped me delve deeper into and feel and own and explore and express the darker corners, essentially. And that means that although I'm accessing that outside of my relationship, it allows me to bring that in. It's a really key piece and a really key agreement that Lisa and I have, which is she's really happy for me to do this. She loves that I do this. She loves the art I create. She loves that I'm able to go out and safely create this art with other women, as long as it serves us. That's the fundamental piece. It's not for me to be going out and getting my hits somewhere else. So I'm really conscious of that. I'm really conscious in the middle of these experiences whether I'm kind of falling into it, like, this is hot, I'm getting off on this. Yeah? Sure, there's a part of me that wants to engage that, wants to devour and kind of fully get into that, but I'm really conscious that as soon as I do that, she's going to feel it, the model's going to feel it. So a fundamental piece in this is for me to be able to feel that and access that and own it and express it in a healthy, contained way that I can then bring back in some way. It's like, I felt this with this woman. I don't necessarily say this, but I would come back with a feeling in my body of I contain it, but I have that like, fuck yeah. Like, that felt really fucking good, but I've kept it really clean. It's really hard to describe. It's like I'm feeling that in my, like owning it in a way that's really contained. Like I've accessed that, I feel it. Now I want to go rip my woman to pieces with this. Like I want to bring this back to her, to us. So I access this and I'll come back and I go, hey, you got a couple of hours tonight? Let's play. I would love you to wear this and I'd love to explore this, or I'd love to play with this. How's that? And I don't know quite how I'd say it. I'm kind of making it up in the moment, but however it is, I'd find a way to keep that alive in me and bring it back in a way that I can almost like transpose or transfer that context that I've explored, that I've accessed to us, so that we get to explore that. I get to play in that zone with whatever it was I accessed, the schoolgirl fantasy or whatever it is, with her. And she gets that from my masculine perspective, all I'm doing is accessing a flavor that I want to explore. I don't necessarily want to fuck that model, but there's a part of me that creates the fantasy and then goes, yeah, that's the flavor I want. That's what I want to taste. Lisa, give me this. This is what I want. Let's explore that. So it's kind of a roundabout answer to your question, but yeah, there is a healing in that, of course. There's the healthy part of that is all I've described, and the ownership of it, and the living out of it, rather than the suppression or the shame or the guilt or the shutting down or the shutting away or the going into a dark room by myself with a computer and having my own little experience around it, which we've all had. Yeah, this is what this call's all about. So it's actually about being able to do this in a healthy way and bring it to your relationship so that you explore that from a place of authenticity and depth rather than shallow porn pervert jerking off in the corner, which is what we're trying to work with to counter here. We've all been there.
Yeah, thank you. Sounds like it's like been a deeper, like a tool for deeper exploration of yourself.
Yeah. And for both of us. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I mean, there's different parts to it. There's I just want to make again the distinction between creating the art in the I call it the studio environment. I don't actually shoot in studios. I find them really stale and unalive. I like a house that has an energy, like or an outdoor scenario, for example, or a warehouse or something grungy, but something that has aliveness. I find studios really stale. But what I'm saying is I call that a studio shoot because it's a non-sexually charged experience. I'm consciously containing that energy. But inside of that, there's the access of the fantasy and there's the tying of the rope. But while I'm tying the rope on the models, I'm doing it like we're having a chat about the weather or something, you know, or some other conversation. We're having some other conversation because I'm creating an artistic piece. I've described what I want. We don't talk about the weather, but you know what I mean. We don't talk about getting into sexually charged stuff. It's kept clean. But still I'm accessing what's there and creating it, but containing it, and then taking that experience back home. So it nourishes my relationship.
Do you describe with the models like that you're working with the feeling or the energy that you want to convey to come through the pictures?
It's more of a yeah, sometimes I have to feel the model.
Mm-hmm.
I have to feel the model. Here's my experience as well. Some models know how to create art.
Yeah.
And some models are pretty titty girls that are strippers, literally strippers. I mean, I've literally worked with strippers, and I don't mean that in any derogatory way. What I mean by that is they are used to offering their tits and arse in exchange for reward, financial reward, or being seen, being validated, being recognized. And when they do a photo shoot, that's what it means to them. Oh, we're going to be, you know, my value to the world as a sexual being is tits and arse. Unfortunately, that's what the world has programmed them with, and that's a whole other conversation. So it's difficult, sometimes impossible, to convey to someone whose model of the world looks like that I want to evoke a certain erotic flavor and for them to express it through their body, because they're not used to it in the same way that most men on here are probably not used to the realm that I've been discussing today. Mm. Yeah? So we have to practice that. We have to get familiar with that. We have to get comfortable with that. And that's the same with a lot of the models that I work with, who just haven't been seen at depth sexually. They haven't had a man hold a container safely and strongly enough for her to go beyond expressing tits and arse sexuality.
Yeah.
And, you know, a clitoral orgasm or whatever it is. There's a whole realm of sexual exploration beyond that. And that depends on the container that's created and the leadership of that container and the trust that's held in that container for her to be vulnerable and expressed in that. So again, there are many threads to pull in this conversation, but I hope that answers your question in some way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, so we got a couple other questions. Tate, why don't you jump in? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Tate, hey, yes.
Hey, Mo. So I'm just wondering, do you have experience with healing trauma? Like I've had sexual traumas that make it so, for me, like even attempting to do what you're doing is like out of the spectrum.
Sure.
You know, it's out of my reality right now. Just basically just feeling safe in my body is more like, that's where I'm working on, is just like just being able to be in a woman's presence or even people's presence, and like, you know, I don't know if it's just breathing, you know, more breathing practices, or, you know, something that helps heal. I don't know if you have any experience with that.
There's several aspects to this. So if we describe two core paths, one is the path of healing the trauma, and one is the path of artistically navigating life. So I would highly recommend to everyone to do whatever therapy you need to unpack, heal the trauma that you've experienced in your life. And everyone's experienced trauma to some degree. And yeah, trauma therapy like Grinberg therapy, which I've experienced, which is something you may want to explore, for example, which is when a practitioner is noticing deeply what happens in your body when you talk about certain topics, and then works with those specifically to release them from the body. There are many ways to work with trauma. Peter Levine's done a lot of work around sexual trauma as well. There's a great program you can buy and read and listen to. So for you and for anyone who's experiencing this, and we all have this to some degree, doing the trauma work is really, really important outside of this context that we're talking about. Because as you said, even the thought of entering into any of this brings up responses in you that would make it very difficult to navigate these in real life. So one of the things that, one of the frames that we talked about earlier was not only making it safe for her, but making it safe for you as well. And what that means is tiny, tiny steps. Tiny steps. Okay, so as well as doing the trauma work, you want to be practicing these core practices that I've talked about, of paying attention to your body, paying attention to your breath, paying attention to your energy and your consciousness, and how all these things respond to various stimuli. Okay, and it could be just thinking about these things that we've talked about. No doubt your body's already gone into some kind of response, even feeling into that in your imagination. This could be happening. So even as you explore that internally, a practice would be noticing what happens and regulating your breath and body, even as you imagine what's going on, even as you're thinking about it. And as you're thinking about it, you have the capacity to change the volume, change the intensity, change the fantasy. So instead of going for a full-on fantasy in your mind, it could be just, okay, I'm going to imagine a pretty girl leaning forward and showing me her cleavage. And that's it. Yeah? It doesn't have to be, I don't know what, 3 women, anal sex, right? It doesn't have to be any full-blown anything. It's literally, okay, how much can I handle? What can my nervous system handle? How far do I want to gently ease myself into this in my own imagination so that I can modulate my internal experience, pay attention to my breath and body, regulate those as I'm navigating this internal experience, do it for 3 minutes as a practice, and then cut it clean, done, shake it out your body, have a shower, which helps cleanse the system, go outside on the earth, fresh air, daylight. I mean, all these things can make a significant shift from a traumatic response in the body, but really you want to be working with a therapist to help you navigate this as well. But they're two distinct paths, doing the trauma work and artfully navigating life in a way that serves you in practice and in reality in the world.
Thank you.
Sure, brother. Thank you. Great question.
It is a great question. I just want to emphasize therapists more like a somatic therapist. You know, a lot of therapy, we can just kind of talk about our stuff and never heal or process the traumas. So yeah, just make sure you look into somatic therapy of some sort.
Yeah.
So Ori, is that how you say your name? You're up.
Ori, hey.
Can you hear me, Mo?
Yes.
First of all, thank you for everything you're sharing. I deeply resonate, and I'm a big fan of the energetics behind things, like instead of techniques. So, like through Shibari, through different arts like that, it's like, and in lovemaking, like I really feel like that's where it's at. And in my past and my work, in my engagement with women, like it's very clear like that the safety comes first, and to make her feel seen, make her feel held, make her feel to do our role as men. My question is more that lately I've been tapping into this more like dark realms, dark masculine, you know, dynamics of taking more in sexual sexual occasions, also in dance, which is the closest thing to lovemaking in my feeling. And I did join 15 minutes late because I had technical issues, but I don't know if you talked and tapped into dark masculine, those realms of energetics. So it's not a specific question. It's just like, what do you have to say about that off the top of your head? And as well, like in my experience of tapping into that lately, I found it not only very healing for me, but also very liberating and healing for women, as long as we're playing within safety, as long as she knows that I got her and I'm holding her and I'm present with her.
Yeah.
So maybe some words on the dark masculine, and also taking and going into the dark as a way of healing for them and for us as well.
So what is absolutely fundamental when exploring any of this is to remain heart connected. It's absolutely fundamental. It's really, really easy. In fact, I'll withdraw that and I'll start with most men, if I make a generalization, most men are not connected with their heart when they're exploring sexuality, as much as is necessary. We tend to be cock-driven rather than actually heart-driven in sexuality. So it's really important that we come back to an awareness of where we are in our heart space, and in relation to our intimate partner. And we always come back to that. It has to be at the center of exploring all of this. It has to be that we are feeling our heart and feeling her heart and her response when we are exploring these darker realms as a fundamental piece and as the centerpiece, the anchor for all of this exploration. To the point that if you feel you've lost heart connection, which she will notice more than you will, she will notice. It may be a valuable piece for you to have a conversation with your partner and say, hey, I'm really aware of this piece around, I'd love to explore this realm of darker sexual expression. And I know, and I notice that I can lose connection with you at times. And I really want to stay connected. And I would love for you to serve me and us in this exploration by reminding me. And you could do that if you feel me disappear, if you feel me get into my porn mode or my dark fuck mode or whatever you want to call it. If you feel me disconnect, then just reach out and touch my heart in the midst of, you know, dark fuck, for want of a better phrase. We're in that, you know, you're whatever you're doing, you're choking her, it could be whatever, you know, you're pressing her down. It's all consensual, of course. She's loving it, you're in it, you're connected, and all of a sudden, boom, you go past that point of being connected and you just go into this fantasy and she just becomes a body and you're no longer with her. Somehow there needs to be a communication from her, a signaling to you, which could be through a sound, it could be through her eyes, it could be through her reaching out and touching your heart. Some way of signaling to you, hey, you're not with me anymore, you're in porn mode, you're in fuck mode, you're not feeling me, we're not in this together anymore. So it would be valuable to have that conversation, to remind her to bring you back. And the same could be for her. It could be that she gets lost in her ecstasy, she gets lost in her building towards orgasm. And you may need to remind her to come back. It's less likely that she'll get lost in that darkness than you will, but it's possible. Women tend to have more of the focus on the heart connection and being in a relationship. And we can get very lost in the fantasy. She can too. But in regards to your question, it's the key piece here is somehow having a consciousness or an agreement or an awareness or a sound or a word or something that's like, hey, come back. I want to go there with you, but I need you with me. I want to go darker, but I need you with me. I need to feel your heart. I need to trust you. I need to know that you're with me and feeling me and in this together. I don't want to be lost, feel you lost, and you're just using me to explore your fantasy. That's a very different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just to say the other piece of that, which is like, I love your answer. And also there is the piece I feel like I meet women, or I have women facilitators, friends, that they're saying like, I need to feel your cock, right? So the other piece is a lot of men today, they escape to their hearts and they lose connection to their cock, and then you're not penetrating her with anything. So
exactly,
you have them both, you know, because yeah, a lot of emasculation today.
Yeah, it's the other end of the spectrum. It's the new age guys who are all about heart and light and love, and they have big heart and they have no idea how to access darkness, no idea how to actually own that and bring that and keep the two in balance. And very often it's about bringing a practice where you're learning how to be more in your body. And that could be through some pretty intense martial arts practice, like jiu-jitsu is a really good practice for that. When you're on the ground and you're pounding with another guy, to full-on engagement, and that really gets you into your body, really gets you into full-on engagement with another being. It's at the darker end of the spectrum because there is an intensity, there's a competition, there's a battle, there's a warrior kind of training. It doesn't have to be competitive, but it's that kind of flavor of engagement. But then you start to bring that in at the lower end of the spectrum, which some men need, because as you say, they're all heart, they're all love, they're all light, and they don't have that awakened bottom end of the spectrum. That's really important to bring to this. So it's a balance of both. Absolutely, it's great that you brought that point. But I feel you as a very heart-centered man, and you're accessing the darkness, but it's the balance of the two that's really fundamental to this. Yeah. Thank you. It's a great question.
Good stuff. Thanks, Ori. Appreciate it. Yeah. So want to honor our time container and bring things to a close, unless you're open to going over. Oh, just want to respect your time.
I'm happy to take another question. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we got it.
It's rare we get these opportunities to talk about this stuff, so let's do
sounds
this.
good. I've got the time. So, Blaine, why don't you jump in?
Hey Mo and Soma, thanks for putting this on.
Hey Blaine.
It's kind of funny. You kind of started talking about what my question was with the last question. So I just got out of like a 3-year relationship back in July when I upended and moved 2,000 miles away. We just started, like I just started tapping into that like darker side because like you said, I you called it the new age heart and light, and I dived deep in that, right? Like very in touch with my heart, my emotions, and able to communicate well and listen and things like that. But kind of like ignored that dark masculinity that I was kind of like, I went from that in my younger years, right? Like in my teenage years, to this heart and light. And now I'm over in this heart and light and re-exploring this. And I guess my question would be is like, I ended up having a sexual encounter this week and like couldn't even like pull through with it because there was no heart there, right? Like it was just like meaningless. There's nothing going on. And so I'm kind of at this place, like, is there a way, or what would be the way? Because I feel like there should always be a way to dive deeper into this darker side without necessarily, and you touched on it with jujitsu and stuff like that, being sexual, or is there a safe way to go about it with being sexual? Because at this point right now, I don't see myself being able to have like a time commitment for a meaningful relationship, right? And I don't want to cause harm in that manner.
Sure. So to me, martial arts is a really ideal exploration for this. I've been training for many years in what's called Bujinkan martial arts, which is an umbrella term for a collection of schools, 6 samurai schools and 3 ninjutsu schools. So they're from traditional Japanese lineage. And we train with all kinds of weapons. We train with swords and knives. It's pretty intense. I mean, the intention of this martial art is to learn to kill or control. That's the way I summarize it. You control your enemy or you take them out. That's what it's designed for. So I've often imagined when I've been in the dojo and training with a bunch of guys, we're playing with plastic knives, wooden swords. They're harmless weapons, but the intention is there. And I quite often look around the room imagining what a fucking mess it would be if these were live blades. We're cutting and we're stabbing and we're getting someone slitting the throat, and it's all good fun, right? It's big boy fun in one sense, and it's serious business. You're actually training how to kill someone with a knife, how to defend with a knife, and that's a whole other conversation, around dealing with knife play and so on. But what I'm saying in this is, if you approach that kind of martial arts practice with the same commitment, depth, openness to the training and the kind of experience we're talking about here, to the layers of depth that are accessible inside of that, not just to have fun with a bunch of guys playing with swords, but to actually be in it with the feeling of, I'm learning how to use a sword that has been designed to kill. I'm learning how to practice the art of both receiving and attacking with a knife. And as you begin to explore those practices and you really allow yourself to feel the truth of what you're actually exploring is, you are accessing those darker realms. You are training your body to be more comfortable with the darker realms of being in practice, being in training, being in service to the men that you are training with. The idea behind, I mean, fundamentally, if you go back to Japanese times, a couple of hundred years ago, when we're training in service to our community and to the men that we're with, because essentially we're training him to watch. I'm training you to watch my back. That's what we're training for. I'm training you to know that I can trust you to take out some other guy who may be heading towards my family. Yeah. So at a deeper level, at a warrior level, that's what we're aiming for. We're training in service to each other to not only train in weaponry, but to train the character of the man, to be able to kill if necessary. And at the, I'm going to say this. This is a whole other conversation, but essentially, she, our intimate partner, and again, this applies in a homosexual relationship as well. It's irrelevant of your sexuality. But she wants to feel that your capacity, your killer capacity, she wants to feel that you have that, but you are safe and trustable with it. And at the same time, if it's necessary, you have the capacity to defend if the context and circumstance arises. So it's accessing that energy and being able to bring that energy to a relational context, but having it safely contained. You don't want to be running around with a knife like, yeah, I've got the energy to be a killer and showing off with some blade. But it's being able to transmit that energy through your body. So she's able to feel that, but in a way that's really, really trustable. Like she can feel that transmission of darkness, that ownership of darkness, that feeling that's coming through from your heart, your belly, your balls, your entire body is transmitting that. But it's done in a healthy, contained way, if that makes sense. And it's very hard to summarize this. It's very hard to summarize this in a way that perhaps can be gotten to the depths that are there. It's a whole other conversation. But this is about accessing and practicing, expanding your bandwidth and capacity at both the light and the dark end of both, heart-centered new age guy. I don't really like the term new age, but that love and light end of the spectrum, and the fucking killer. But being able to explore and express that whole realm from the healthy masculine, not the unhealthy masculine. So I would recommend some martial arts, essentially. I would recommend that as an exploration for you, and find something that's more in the classical realm than in the sports realm, in the traditional realms, rather than in the competitive realm.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mo. I think there was one other piece, and maybe you and I could follow up on that one, Blaine. But just to clarify, what I also heard was something about like, how do you sort of be unavailable to relationship currently? Like that's just you don't have the capacity to really be in a longer term relationship and be committed, but you still want to be able to connect sexually, is what I heard.
Yeah.
And that's a really great inquiry. Who else would be curious about that topic here? A couple other guys. Yeah. Well, why don't we follow up about that? Maybe I'll even do like, we could do an Instagram live sometime, or I'll write a post on it. But
Sure.
yeah, let's move on to somebody else. Try to get at least one more in. Anthony, you've had your hand up for a while, so why don't you jump in? If you could be on video, that would be awesome.
Hi, Mo. How are you?
Anthony, hey. Good.
Um,
Good to not quite see you, but I can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you, brother.
Go on.
The question I have is, last year I was practicing for my own growth to try to hold my seed and keep the powers within. And I started to become really, really good at this. But then moving into this year and changing sexual partners, I found that I'm actually getting caught up in my head so much, and all the strength and the powers that I sort of grow with last year, I can't seem to tap into them at all again. And I was wondering whether it's, you know, some sort of techniques you could give me, or ideas you could give me to be able to embrace that powers and take back, you know, the control in the sexual interactions, or whether it's actually also that displays the depth of connection with the sexual partner.
So I'm just going to turn you up a little because your audio wasn't as clear as I'd like. So let me just try and summarize. You were practicing semen retention, essentially, non-ejaculation with a different partner, and your experience with a new partner is that it's changed your... Just describe for me one more time, because I didn't quite hear the audio.
Well, yeah, I just don't seem to have that control that I had the development. I got to a stage where I was able to control things excellent, and then you're able to expand that sexual encounter so much more deeper and experience the full feminine as well as, you know, the deep and dark masculine. But right now I'm getting caught up in my head, and I was wondering whether there's either new techniques or other ways to experience this, or whether it's because of the connection with the sexual partner.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you. So part of this is deepening the practice that I've described, which I think you're familiar with, which is circulating the breath and filling the space around you, and pushing the excess sexual energy or the sexual charge up your spine and out of your body, so that you're lowering the pressure, lowering the sexual intensity, if you like. So there are ways to practice that outside of intimacy. There are masturbatory practices that you can do to practice this, so that you're essentially doing the same practice but on your own. And that can be with internal fantasy, it could be with porn stimulation or pictures of some kind. Every man has to find their own way to do this. But again, it's like a dojo situation where you train yourself outside of the intimate experience with your partner. When you're with your partner, you could also, again, have conversations where you say, okay, my experience is this, I really want to explore this, and I would love to set up some practice sessions with you where we can practice this as a formal practice. So it could be that you say, okay, a couple of times a week for 15 minutes, you set up a practice session where you're going to be in this breath practice, and you could start with lower levels of sexual stimulation. So it could be that rather than having full sex, she is pleasuring you with her hand. Or it could be that she's mixing that with a bit of oral pleasure. But again, as I spoke to earlier with one of the other guys, when we were talking about regulating the experience, you could be talking to her, be in communication in this practice of directing her, literally more or less. So it could be that you're saying, you have a feeling inside that you're managing your energy well, you're circulating your energy well, and you say to her, okay, turn up the intensity, whatever that means. A stronger squeeze with the hand, deeper in the mouth. I mean, whatever it may be, it's for you to explore this with her. It's for you to be really communicative with her, and open and clean around this. You know, it requires everything that we've talked about in this conversation to have that conversation with her. And essentially, it would be a conscious navigation and regulation of your own internal experience, and also literally directing her through degrees of intensity so that you're not taking yourself over the edge because of what she's giving you or practicing with you, the intensity that she's bringing to you. So that's one part of it. Another part of it, which I think I understood as being around the depth of connection with this partner, is changing your experience, if I heard you correctly. So again, this is something we could drill down into, but in summary, again, it's around regulation. It's about, how can I say this? Acknowledging the depth of intimacy and connection you have with this partner, and regulating your sexual exchange in these practices, your sexual intensity in these practices, to accommodate that. So that, I mean, I totally get what you're saying. If she is absolutely surrendering, if she is, it's very different to be with a woman who's just giving you her body to fuck, in one sense, is one way to say it, as opposed to someone who is opening her heart, opening her soul, allowing you to gaze into the depths of her being through her eyes, devotionally offering herself to you. It's a very, very different experience, and that in itself can bring us close to ejaculation. So again, it's one way to approach this is to consciously navigate that. And you could literally, how can I say this? It's almost like the experiences I've had with the models, where I would describe what I want and ask her to do her best to practice that as an offering to me in the sexual exchange. So you could say to her, what I find too intense is when you do this. So could you somehow turn that down a little and give me a little more of this or a little less of this? So you're very much in control, and it just requires very conscious navigation by you of your own breath, of the experience of what she's offering you, and your conscious direction step by step. And as I said to one of the other guys, baby steps. There's no need to hurry into this with any speed or intensity. It really is a step-by-step experience, so that you're training your nervous system to go through the gears. And if you find you're going too fast, too deep, too intense, just dial it back and then play in that zone for a while and train your body to handle that, and then go up a step. Does that help?
It does. Thank you very much, brother. Thank you very much. Yeah, it gives me some ideas of little practices to try and try to, yeah, slowly deepen it from there. But
Right.
yeah, it has been quite hard getting caught in my mind, because then I think, you know, I'm just giving myself up too easy. I'm just falling into, you know, just surrendering rather than actually controlling the experience and enjoying it, really deepening it.
Yeah,
thank you very
so
much.
just to give one other piece on that, if you happen to go too close to the trigger and the trigger's pulled, just let go and enjoy it. Like, just enjoy the orgasm, right? But what I'm saying here is, keep your practice sessions as formal practice sessions. If you happen to go past the edge and you get triggered to ejaculate, then just enjoy it. Let go of it, and let go of any shame or dissatisfaction or guilt or anything that you might decide to beat yourself up with. Just enjoy it, and then come back to another practice session another time. It's really important that we don't associate any negative feelings with a feeling of failure, for example, in that kind of context, so that we're continuing to train our nervous system to remain open in all of this. It's a key piece as well.
Thank you, brother. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Anthony. Really appreciate that.
Thanks so much.
So yeah, so I would invite, there's a couple of guys that had questions. I don't think we're gonna have time for. Maybe you guys can just pop those in the chat, and at some point, Mo and I could do another one of these sessions or write a post about it or something like that, just so we can start to bring this to a close.
Sure.
That would be great if you guys want to share, and you can keep
There were
it.
some really great questions. I really appreciate the opportunity to dive into those. You never quite know what's going to show up on these calls, so thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to close there, and I want to thank every one of you for being here. If you arrived a little bit late, you'll be getting access to the replay, so you could watch whichever part you missed for a couple of days. So make sure to check your email. And yeah, it's been really a pleasure having you here, Mo, and learning from you, and getting to, excuse me, I'm just going to put you on the center view here so that I can look at you. Yeah, it's been great. I really honor all the work that you've done, you leading by example, and kind of raising the bar in a good way for men to be showing up with more integrity in their energy, right? And I think there's so much we didn't cover, just on like how that could actually benefit our lives personally, which I think is important for men to recognize too. Like, why would I get this stuff handled? But that'll have to be in a future conversation.
For sure. Well, look, thanks again for the invitation. I really appreciate you making this space available, and all you guys showing up today for this call. It's been it's always a pleasure to dive into these conversations. And thank you so much. Essentially, what I'm doing here is simply sharing my path, my experience, and I just happen to have had interest and delved into these aspects of martial arts and rope bondage and photography, and it's been a really, really powerful, empowering experience for me, and given me such insights into realms that we rarely touch upon in men's work, realms that we rarely delve into, and ways we can bring practice in our everyday life that can impact and serve our explorations of these realms in intimacy and relationship. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, make sure you guys follow Mo on Instagram. You'll get an email with links to check him out. He's got some really beautiful, kind of provocative art, if you haven't seen it already. And I just had like a last minute curiosity, but like, in terms of this as art, right? And receiving that art as a practice rather than just, like the way we might normally approach it from this kind of teenage mentality. Like, yeah, I know there's an opportunity to get prints and stuff like that. Like, how might a man be able to honor that and not get sort of sucked into the fantasy of all of it?
It's the same core practice, the same core pieces we've been talking about. It really is. It's in all these everyday experiences we have with real women in the real world, or incredibly beautiful women online that we come across in different ways. It's noticing what happens in the body. It's noticing what we're practicing in that moment.
Yeah.
Are you noticing that your body is holding the breath? If so, choose to practice something else. Just pay attention and choose a different way of practice. We've touched upon many key pieces here, and all of these can be exploded into bigger conversations. But yeah, it's as we say in martial arts, we always go back to the fundamentals. Always go back to the fundamentals. I've been doing martial arts for 20 years, and still some of my basics suck. I just need to keep going back to fundamentals, and that's where we're at with this. Breath and body.
Breath and body. Yeah, well, that's a great way to close. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and look forward to seeing you guys in future events if you can make it.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Have a nice day, evening, wherever you are in the world. Take it easy.